Hey guys, tonight we are wandering into a world where the desert wind carries whispers of treasure and the soft glow of gold dust hovers over clay stalls. Picture yourself standing in the marketplace of Timbuktu, the sun a sleepy orange disk above the horizon, its heat softened by evening air. The streets hum not with shouting or clamor, but with the slow shuffle of feet, the steady creak of baskets, and the faint jingling of small brass weights dangling from traders' belts. You breathe in dust, spice, and something faintly metallic. Yes, even gold has a scent if you let your imagination drift far enough. You probably won't survive this scene in real life, between the desert heat, malaria, and the questionable hygiene of medieval wells. But here, in this bedtime version, you survive quite comfortably. You stroll lazily past heaps of kola nuts, coils of rope, carved wooden spoons, and then you see it. Little mounds of powdered sunlight. Gold dust, poured carefully into tiny leather pouches, handled with the precision of a jeweler, yet sold in measures as casual as scooping flour. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, type in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is there right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean closer, watching as a merchant shakes out a strip of cloth. Its fibers already coated in sparkling dust from dozens of transactions. The customer nods, holds out a tiny brass scale, and you see how seriously they treat weight. In this world, coins aren't minted with neat little stamps. Instead, value exists in pinches and spoonfuls, balanced on scales that could fit in the palm of your hand. One sneeze, you imagine, and the day's profit would scatter into the air like glitter at a kindergarten art project. Still, the system works. Gold dust has no need for coins or central banks here. Its flexibility is the strength of Mali's market. Historians agree this weighing practice kept commerce nimble, though they still argue whether it was efficient for larger-scale trade. You try not to laugh at the thought of a merchant standing in the desert wind, hunched over, counting specks of dust like an exhausted office intern counting paper clips. The more you walk, the more you notice how ingrained gold has become in everyday life. Our child chases a goat past a stall, scattering sand onto a trader's scales, and nobody seems shocked. Everyone here is used to brushing away grains to separate gold from the dirt. Gold is both sacred and ordinary, shining yet surprisingly mundane. It is not locked away in vaults, but carried in pouches tied at the waist, traded for salt, cloth, or even onions. Yes, onions. You chuckle quietly at the thought of a man deciding whether his family needs stew more than a pinch of literal treasure. You pause by a leather worker. His hands are darkened with dye, his nails permanently marked by years of craft. On his bench sits a little pouch, no bigger than your palm, tied with a thin string. He unties it slowly, almost reverently, and you see the dust inside catch the setting sun, shimmering like fireflies. He measures it out with practiced ease, pouring tiny piles onto his scale. One side dips, then rises as he adjusts grain by grain. You realize that this dust isn't just payment, it is rhythm, ritual, almost music. But gold dust also carries risks. You overhear whispers of merchants licking their fingers to steal a few specks, or traders dusting their scales with heavier sand to cheat buyers. One fringe tale even tells of a man coating his beard with sticky resin, leaning casually over a scale, and then, brushing off golden crumbs later. Whether that really happened or not, you can't help but smile. It's like the medieval version of someone pocketing snacks from the office pantry. The crowd around you thickens. A woman balances a basket of fish on her head, weaving past men in long flowing robes dyed in indigo so deep it almost shimmers. Indigo dye is expensive, but here, surrounded by pouches of dust, it feels at home. She lowers her basket, bargains briskly, and after only a few exchanges of words and a handful of glowing dust, the fish changes hands. And you realize, this entire economy moves not with heavy bars or massive vaults, but with flicks of fingers and pinches of dust. Wealth here is tactile, personal, intimate. You don't just own gold. You feel it sift through your fingertips like sand slipping from a child's bucket. And when you sleep tonight, you might dream of that subtle sensation, the tickle of ancient wealth trickling across your skin. As twilight deepens, lanterns flicker into life, casting gold into softer hues. The marketplace slows, yet trade doesn't stop. In fact, it takes on a more intimate rhythm. Friends gather, share bowls of millet porridge, and exchange pouches in the glow of candlelight. You sit among them, listening to the murmur of voices, half stories, half negotiations. You wonder how many fortunes begin or vanish in such quiet moments. A donkey brays in the distance. Someone laughs too loudly. A baby cries, then quiets against its mother's shoulder. All around, the air carries the delicate sparkle of gold dust, a dust that weighs more than words, more than promises, more than entire caravans. And here you are, drifting, your eyelids heavy, listening to the soft scales tip back and forth. The sound of bells reaches you long before you see their source. A soft chiming, irregular yet strangely hypnotic, floats across the desert air. You turn your head and notice the first silhouettes. Camels, tall and awkward, their long necks swaying like slow pendulums under the weight of the sun. Behind them, stretching far into the horizon, is a line that seems to go on forever. Caravans creeping toward Timbuktu, their shadows melting into the sand. The air grows heavier with dust as they approach. You taste grit on your tongue, feel it cling to your eyelashes. Still, you don't move away, you're too curious. You watch as each camel steps carefully, padded feet spreading like cushions on the dunes. Their burdens are odd and geometric, rectangular blocks wrapped in hide, stacked neatly like puzzle pieces across their backs. You lean closer and the truth becomes clear. Salt. Heavy, chalky white slabs carried across hundreds of miles. The locals greet this sight with little fanfare. For them this is normal, the lifeblood of trade. For you it feels almost ceremonial. The desert has spit forth its offering, and the city hums in expectation. The camels kneel at the edge of the market, folding their legs in a slow, deliberate dance, as if they too are relieved to shed their burdens. Their handlers, faces wrapped in indigo turbans that leave only their eyes visible, speak little. You sense the weight of silence. In the desert, silence is currency. Every word costs moisture. Salt, you realize, is no less precious than gold here. Block for block, dust for dust, the two are balanced in trade. It's hard to imagine in your world, where salt is hidden in potato chips and sprinkled without thought. But here salt is survival. Without it, water alone cannot keep a body alive in the desert heat. You picture a medieval Malian family trading gleaming gold dust for nothing more than a block of white crystal to flavor their millet porridge and keep their muscles from failing. Historians often repeat that salt was worth its weight in gold, though they still argue whether this phrase was more poetic than literal. You smirk, picturing a tired merchant debating metaphors while trying not to faint from dehydration. The unloading begins. Each block of salt, coated in desert dust, thuds against the ground. The sound is oddly satisfying, like the soft knock of a wooden mallet on dough. You imagine it as the heartbeat of commerce. One block here, another block there, all stacking into small crystalline mountains that glint under the low sun. Among the crowd, children scurry about, chasing after the handlers, eyes wide with excitement. To them, these caravans are as thrilling as circus parades. One boy stretches out his hand to touch the rough edge of a salt block, then quickly withdraws as if it burns. You chuckle. It's not hot, just coarse, like a brick made of desert tears. The camels themselves seem unfazed by the bustle. They sit, chewing lazily, eyes half closed, spitting now and then with no shame at all. You can't help but notice their smug expressions. If ever an animal looked like it knew it was indispensable, it's the camel. You imagine one muttering under its breath, "Try hauling your gold without me, buddy." In the center of it all, negotiations begin. Merchants weigh salt against gold dust, haggling softly. A trader pours shimmering grains into a brass scale until it tips just enough to equal the solid block beside it. The balance looks absurd, one side glittering like captured starlight, the other blunt and pale as chalk. Yet both are equally vital, equally desired. You overhear whispers of longer journeys still, routes stretching toward Tagaza, the salt mines dug so deeply that workers sometimes lived in huts made of salt blocks. Some accounts claim they even used salt slabs as furniture, though historians still argue whether this is truth or travelers' exaggeration. You imagine sitting on a salt chair on a hot day and decide that, if true, those miners must have been both practical and slightly masochistic. As the sun dips lower, the marketplace transforms into a living painting. Golden dust swirls in the air from earlier trades, mixing with the white sparkle of salt, turning the twilight haze into something otherworldly. The two substances, one dug from beneath forests, the other carved from beneath deserts, meet here in quiet equilibrium. You close your eyes for a moment and let yourself drift with the rhythm of it all. The thud of salt, the faint clink of scales, the sigh of camels resting, the murmur of voices carried like threads on the breeze. You are suspended in a moment where wealth doesn't glitter in vaults or banks, but sits on the back of a tired animal, trudges across dunes, and balances delicately on a scrap of metal no bigger than your palm. And just before the lanterns are lit, you realize the caravans may look silent, but their arrival is a roar, louder than drums, louder than bells. They announce a truth you cannot ignore. In ancient Mali, gold was only half the story. The other half was white, heavy, and tasted faintly of tears. The market hushes, as though someone has drawn a curtain across the sun. You glance up, and through the dusty light, a procession takes shape. First come the musicians, drummers beating slow, steady rhythms that make the ground tremble beneath your sandals. Then come the attendants, robes of deep indigo flowing like midnight rivers, their faces solemn. And then finally he appears, Mansa Musa. You've heard of him, of course. You probably couldn't scroll through a medieval gossip feed without bumping into stories of his wealth. But standing here, you feel the air change. The crowd bends, knees meeting earth in practiced choreography. And you, though only a drifting spectator, feel yourself bow as well, almost involuntarily. His robe glitters, not with tacky sequins, but with woven threads so fine they catch the sun like strands of liquid fire. A turban rests on his head, snow-white and imposing, and at his side a staff tipped with gold. Behind him, attendants carry baskets heavy enough to bend their shoulders, each basket spilling with, you guessed it, more gold dust. The effect is dizzying, like watching a magician pull endless scarves from a sleeve. Here is a man who once took a pilgrimage to Mecca, and in doing so casually destabilized economies along the way. You picture him in Cairo, handing out so much gold that the market drooped under its weight, prices wobbling like jelly on a plate. Historians still argue whether that economic ripple lasted for years or decades, but you imagine the locals muttering, "Great, thanks, Musa." Now bread costs twice as much. He walks slowly through the market, not hurried. Why would he be? Time itself seems to stretch around him. You notice the smallest details. The way he holds his staff like a conductor, guiding a sleepy orchestra. The way children peek through their fingers at the shine of his jewelry. The way merchants instinctively lower their eyes, as if staring too directly might be dangerous. Mansa Musa stops before a stall. The merchant, trembling, offers a simple gift, a bolt of cloth dyed the faintest shade of red. Musa accepts it with the faintest nod, and then gestures. Her servant steps forward, pours a cascade of dust onto the merchant's scale, and for a moment it looks like sunlight itself has been scooped and poured. The merchant stares open-mouthed, as though he has just been handed a small kingdom. You realize that wealth here isn't just measured in gold, but in generosity. Musa doesn't hoard. He disperses, and in doing so he cements his reputation. In a world where rulers often rule by fear, he rules by awe. Yet quirks cling even to emperors. A tale lingers of Musa, traveling with such a vast entourage, tens of thousands of people, hundreds of camels, wagons of gold, that villagers along the way panicked, thinking an army had come to devour their land. Another fringe story insists he once ran out of gold mid-journey and had to borrow just to keep up appearances. Whether that's truth or historians' bedtime joke, you smile at the thought. Even the richest man in the world might have forgotten his wallet once. The crowd around you hums with reverence. Griots, the storytellers, already murmur beginnings of songs. You catch fragments. The man whose footsteps bend markets. The man whose shadow glitters like the river. Their words coil upward like smoke, destined to become legend. As Musa passes, you notice something softer, almost hidden. He touches the head of a child, gives a tiny coin, yes, an actual minted coin, rare as stars here, and the boy beams. For a moment you forget the scale of wealth and remember the simple weight of kindness. The air seems to breathe again as Musa's procession drifts on, music fading into the distance. People begin to stir, murmuring, rushing to touch the ground where his sandals pressed. You lean back against a stall, dizzy, half from the heat and half from the spectacle, and in that drowsy haze, one thought echoes. Gold in Mali was not just currency, not just metal, it was theater, myth, and gravity itself. And Musa, the emperor, was its brightest star. You leave the marketplace behind and drift further south, where the air thickens with humidity, and the buzz of unseen insects trembles through the trees. The Sahara's dry breath is gone. Here green presses close on all sides. You follow a narrow trail that twists through forested hills until the faint thud of picks and the metallic scrape of tools reaches your ears, the mines of Bambuk and Boer. Hidden beneath the canopy, shaded by leaves that shimmer with trapped sunlight, men die into the earth like ants chasing sweetness. You stand at the edge of a pit, looking down at figures bent double, their skin shining with sweat, their hands blackened from earth. They pull up baskets filled with gravel, then pour them onto mats spread wide in the clearing. Gold mining in Mali wasn't grand industrial spectacle. It was intimate, almost quiet. Dust sifted through fingers. Grains were sorted from stone with patience that could only be born of generations. Each speck mattered, each flake treasured. You watch a boy no older than 10 squat beside his father, carefully swirling a bowl of mud in water until a faint glimmer appears at the bottom. His grin is as bright as the treasure itself, but secrecy is everywhere. Guards watch with stern eyes, spears in hand, reminding you that these mines belong to kings. The raw nuggets you glimpse here, those chunky, dazzling bits of pure gold, will never leave Mali. Only dust is allowed to wander into markets. You realize you are standing in the heartbeat of an empire, one that beats quietly beneath the soil, hidden from the world yet pulsing power into every caravan and every story. You crouch closer to a stream where women rinse gravel in woven baskets. The water runs cloudy, then clears, carrying whispers of wealth downstream. You imagine fish swimming past golden specks, indifferent to fortunes drifting past their scales. Perhaps one of them swallows a grain, becoming unintentionally the richest fish in West Africa. A historian's debate floats into your mind. Some argue that Mali's mines were so vast, they fueled Europe's own hunger for gold centuries later. Others claim their scale has been exaggerated, swollen by legend and foreign accounts. You shrug mentally. Either way, the ground beneath your feet feels heavy with promise, like standing on a buried star. You shift, and the air carries a story told in hushed tones. Miners sometimes carried talismans, charms against evil spirits who disliked being disturbed. One fringe tale whispers of a man who angered the spirits by boasting too loudly of his find. The next day he vanished into the earth, the pit collapsing as though swallowing him whole. True or not, the miners here still avoid loud celebrations. Their joy is quiet, their laughter tucked into their sleeves. Above you, the forest canopy shivers with parrots screeching in bursts, a wild contrast to the discipline below. Every sound is part of the rhythm, the clink of stone, the splash of water, the rasp of baskets against gravel. Even the air tastes different, earthy, mineral with a faint tang like iron but sweeter. You close your eyes and let the scent ground you, imagining yourself sinking slowly into the soil, layer by layer, until you are surrounded by shimmering veins. The work never truly ends. Night will bring torches, smoke curling upward like prayers. Some miners will rest, others will whisper stories of spirits. Others will continue sifting in darkness, trusting their fingertips more than their eyes. And when the baskets fill with dust, it will be gathered, guarded, carried out of the forest along secret paths known only to a few. You realize how strange it is. Gold dust so light it floats in a breath begins here in back-breaking labor, in hands cut raw by stone. The market stalls of Timbuktu may look effortless, their scales dainty and precise, but every pinch of dust began with sweat dripping into gravel, with a miner's spine bent like a bow. And so you step back from the pit, letting the scene settle into your memory. A green world where wealth is born not with a roar but with a whisper, carried in baskets, sifted in bowls, shining faintly at the bottom of muddy water. The forest fades behind you, and the air sharpens again, dry and crisp like a page turning. You return to the trade hub where the golden dust you saw before waits for its perfect partner. Salt. Always salt. You glance around and realize people are carrying blocks of it on their heads, balancing slabs like awkward hats, their necks steady as if carved from wood. The blocks gleam faintly under the sun, chalk white with veins of crystal, some so large you wonder how anyone manages to lift them without groaning. Salt doesn't glitter like gold, but it has its own quiet beauty. When the slabs clink together, they ring with a brittle sound like porcelain struck with a spoon. Traders stack them neatly, row upon row, until the piles resemble miniature fortresses of pale stone. The sight is oddly soothing. Towers of sustenance, fortresses of flavor. Here in Mali, salt was life. Your body craves it more than gold. Lose too much in sweat, and the desert will take you down quicker than thirst. That's why, block for block, salt could be valued as much as the glowing dust. Imagine explaining this to your modern self, who probably sprinkles salt with reckless abandon over fries without realizing you've just mimicked the value system of an empire. Merchants lean over scales again, balancing dust against blocks. One man counts carefully, gold glimmering like fireflies on one side, salt's blunt presence on the other. It feels like a cosmic joke. One sparkles, the other sulks, and yet they meet as equals. You almost expect them to shake hands. Still, stories whisper around the edges. A fringe tale speaks of a caravan lost in the desert, the camels dying one by one, their precious blocks of salt scattered like tombstones across the dunes. When rescuers arrived weeks later, the salt remained untouched, glistening beneath the sun while the gold dust had long since vanished into the wind. Historians still argue whether this tale was a parable or an eyewitness account, but it lingers because it feels true. After all, you can't eat gold. A boy darts past you carrying a small chip of salt in his fist. He licks it absent-mindedly, his face lighting up at the taste. It's a simple pleasure, like a child sneaking sugar in your world. For him, that one crumb is both treat and treasure. You smile, thinking of how absurdly simple joy can be. You stroll further, and the mingled smells of trade fill your nose. Dried fish, spices sharp as lightning, leather fresh from tanning sweat dust, and the faint mineral tang of salt itself. You taste it in the air on your lips, as if the city is feeding you without asking. The Niger River is not far, and you can almost feel its damp breath rising, mixing with this crystalline perfume. The negotiations carry a rhythm all their own. Voices rise, hands gesture. Weights are tested, pouches untied. Some men try to slip dust onto scales slyly, while others shave slivers of salt from blocks when no one is watching. You catch one man blowing across his scales too hard, pretending to remove sand, but really trying to scatter a few grains of gold away. The merchant across from him narrows his eyes. You quickly step aside before things get awkward, because nothing ruins a sleepy stroll like being dragged into a salt-related argument, yet most of it flows smoothly. Salt and gold exchange hands and life continues. Women purchase blocks, break them into smaller pieces, then carry them home to cook or to barter later. Men sling pouches of dust over their shoulders and prepare to spend it on cloth, spices, or perhaps even a story from a griot. The balance between these two substances feels almost poetic. Salt preserves food. Gold preserves memory. Salt sustains the body. Gold sustains the empire. Together they build the rhythm of Mali, a rhythm you've been following since you stepped into this world. The sun leans lower, painting long shadows across the salt towers, making them look like small fortresses guarding the city. You pause and breathe deeply, letting the air coat your throat, letting the faint sting of salt remind you that this empire wasn't built only on shine and spectacle. It was built on taste, survival, and the daily trade-offs between hunger and beauty. You linger there, surrounded by salt and gold, realizing you've never seen two opposites so perfectly matched. One brittle, one malleable, one plain, one dazzling, yet both somehow worth everything. The night air cools and lanterns flicker against the walls of Timbuktu. You find yourself drawn not to the stalls this time, but to a low building where the soft glow of oil lamps leaks through wooden shutters. Inside, the hum of voices blends with the delicate scrape of reed pens. You slip closer, peering over shoulders at parchment spread wide on mats. Here, knowledge itself is weighed, and even words seem to glitter. Scribes bend over manuscripts, their robes brushing the floor as they steady the fragile pages with one hand and guide their pens with the other. The scent of ink is sharp and earthy, mixed with the faint smoke of lamps. You notice how some of the pages are edged with flourishes of gold, dust mixed into pigment, brushed lightly so the letters shimmer when tilted under the light. The effect is subtle, not gaudy, like stars hiding inside sentences. One scholar looks up at you briefly, eyes rimmed with exhaustion but sparkling with quiet pride. He returns to his work, copying a line from a Quran commentary, careful not to smudge. Each mark is deliberate, each stroke almost a prayer. You imagine him falling asleep mid-word, only to wake and continue, as if writing itself were a form of breathing. Gold here takes on a different role. It doesn't buy food or trade for salt, it sanctifies thought. By dusting letters with gold, scribes remind readers that knowledge is as valuable as treasure. You find yourself smiling, realizing this might be the medieval equivalent of someone buying a deluxe hardcover edition just because it has gilded edges. Yet the manuscripts themselves hold quirks. Alongside grand theological works and commentaries, you catch glimpses of texts on medicine, astronomy, and even jokes tucked into the margins. One fringe anecdote insists a scholar once annotated a serious treatise with a complaint about his neighbor's noisy goats. Historians still argue whether such playful marginalia actually existed, or if it's a romantic exaggeration, but you like to believe it's true. After all, even the most serious minds get distracted by goats. You wander deeper into the room where piles of manuscripts lie stacked like bricks of knowledge. Some are bound in leather, cracked and worn. Others are wrapped in cloth, their edges peeking out like shy smiles. The air is thick with dust, yet it feels sacred, as though every particle is infused with centuries of thought. A student recites aloud, his voice smooth and rhythmic, carrying the cadence of Arabic across the room. Others repeat after him, their tones weaving into a soft chorus. The sound wraps around you like a lullaby, blending with the scratch of pens. You realize that here, gold is not only mined from the earth, it is mined from words coaxed out of ink and memory. You lean closer to one manuscript illuminated with gold, and the letters seem to ripple like water. For a moment you wonder if you've drifted too far into dream. But no, it is simply the lamp's flame flickering, turning ink into light. The scribes pause occasionally to dip their pens into ink pots, shaking off excess with a practiced flick. Tiny splatters dot the mats, dark freckles on pale straw. You imagine future historians puzzling over them, debating whether they're careless mistakes or deliberate flourishes. You stifle a laugh, not wanting to disturb the hush. Outside you hear the city settling, goats bleating, women singing lullabies, traders murmuring their final bargains. Inside, the scholars continue oblivious, carried along by their task. Time here stretches unhurried. You find yourself breathing more slowly, matching the rhythm of the pens, feeling each word settle like dust on your skin, and then a quiet moment. A scribe sets aside his work, flexes his cramped fingers, and stares at the golden letters glowing softly in lamplight. You see the tiniest smile curve his lips. Perhaps he knows that centuries later, people far beyond this city will marvel at these very pages. Perhaps he simply enjoys the shimmer. Either way, you understand now. In Timbuktu, words weighed more than wealth, and gold was just the polish that reminded you of their worth. The dawn rises slowly, spilling pale light over the city of Jenny. You rub the sleep from your eyes and step into streets that smell of damp earth and roasting grain. Ahead of you looms a structure so massive it feels alive. The great mosque, built not of marble or stone, but of mud. Its walls glow warm and earthen, spiked with wooden beams jutting like ribs, giving it the look of a giant resting beast. You trail your fingers along the surface. The clay is cool and rough, and every groove tells you this building is not static. It breathes with the people. Each year the townsfolk smear fresh mud across its walls, patching cracks, renewing the skin. Imagine repainting your house annually by smearing it with chocolate frosting. Except this frosting hardens into a fortress against the weather. You almost laugh at the image, though here it is no joke. It is life, devotion, community ritual. But even here gold lingers, not in slabs or glittering domes, but in subtler touches. Patrons wealthy from trade donate shimmering dust for lamps, gilded ornaments, and decorative panels tucked discreetly inside. Gold glows like candlelight within the mud, quiet but undeniable. You realize that in Mali, even humble clay finds companionship with treasure. As you step inside, cool air wraps around you. The interior is vast, quiet, dim except for shafts of sunlight piercing through carved windows. Dust dances in the light like tiny galaxies, and you feel as though you've walked into a pocket of eternity. The floor is smooth, the silence broken only by the shuffle of a few early worshippers. Historians still argue whether the current form of Djenné's mosque is identical to its medieval predecessor or rebuilt centuries later. You shrug inwardly. The debate doesn't matter when you stand here barefoot on cool earth, hearing your own breath echo like part of the architecture. You find yourself seated near a man arranging lamps along the wall. He holds one carefully, and you notice its rim dusted faintly with gold. It catches the morning sun, glowing like a small sun itself. He sets it down, nods at you, and moves on. The gesture is simple, but the meaning is enormous. Even in prayer, wealth is present. Not flaunted, not loud, but woven into devotion like a thread in fabric. A child runs across the courtyard outside, her laugh bouncing between the walls. She holds a scrap of paper with writing, maybe a verse, maybe just a doodle. She pauses to show it to a scholar, who ruffles her hair and sends her skipping away. You smile, realizing that in this city, knowledge, faith, and laughter live side by side. And then a detail so small you almost miss it. A patch of wall glowing faintly, where gold dust was mixed into clay centuries ago. The shimmer is nearly gone, eroded by wind and time, but it lingers like a faint memory. You lean closer, and for a moment you see it. Sunlight trapped in earth, ambition locked in mud. You step back, gazing again at the mosque in its entirety. It is monumental, yes, but also human. Rebuilt, repaired, touched by countless hands. Gold gives it sparkle, but clay gives it soul. Together they tell you that in Mali, wealth wasn't just displayed. It was folded gently into daily life, into worship, into walls that rise and fall with the rhythm of seasons. As you leave, the beams of wood protruding from the walls catch your eye again. Birds perch on them casually, as though unaware they are resting on one of the world's great monuments. A rooster crows, a goat bleats. You can't help but chuckle softly. For all the majesty, life continues unbothered. Even the goats are unimpressed, and so you wander back into the streets, the image of mud and gold lingering in your mind. A reminder that brilliance doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hums quietly, glowing in the cracks of clay. The streets grow quieter as evening stretches across Timbuktu, and you wander toward a small fire crackling at the edge of the square. People gather around in a half circle, leaning close, their eyes wide, their shoulders loose. The griots are here, the storytellers, guardians of memory, human libraries with voices that ripple like rivers. You settle cross-legged among them, letting the fire's warmth kiss your skin as the night air cools. One griot clears his throat, and the crowd leans forward. His voice begins soft, melodic, carrying rhythm even without instruments. He speaks of ancestors, kings, warriors, but always somewhere woven into the tale is gold. Gold dust poured at weddings, golden bracelets wrapped around the wrists of chiefs, golden offerings scattered like crumbs for the spirits of the land. You realize that gold here isn't just wealth, it is character, personality, legend itself. His words grow quicker, more dramatic, and his hands fly like birds through the air. Children gasp when he describes a king who supposedly swallowed a nugget whole to prove his bravery. You nearly snort out loud. Historians still argue whether such tales were ever true or just colorful exaggerations to keep an audience awake. Either way, you picture a poor king hiccuping gold like a medieval slot machine and can't help but grin. Another griot begins, his voice deeper, almost rumbling. He tells of a queen who, according to legend, possessed a cloak that shimmered like a sunrise because it was threaded with strands of gold. When she walked, people said, it looked as though dawn itself followed her. A fringe detail claims she never allowed anyone to touch it, not even her children, for fear the cloak would dissolve into dust. True or not, the tale carries weight, and the firelight seems to shimmer as though in agreement. The griot's rhythm is hypnotic. You find yourself swaying slightly, eyelids heavy, caught in the current of their cadence. Their stories flow not just as entertainment, but as binding, tying generations together, weaving identity with memory. Each tale is a chain, each link glowing faintly, and you realize that without them, gold would only be metal. With them, it becomes meaning. You notice the younger griots, apprentices really, watching intently. They mouth words silently, memorizing, practicing cadence. One taps his knee in rhythm, eager to leap in. Knowledge here isn't written down in dusty books alone. It is breathed, sung, passed from tongue to ear. If the manuscripts you saw earlier are libraries of ink, these griots are libraries of flesh. A pause falls. The fire crackles louder, embers floating up like sparks of dust. Then a griot leans forward and begins a story so quiet that the crowd hushes instinctively. He whispers of spirits who guard the mines, jealous of the gold beneath the earth. He tells of miners who bring offerings, honey, milk, even songs before they dig, asking permission. Sometimes he says the spirits agree and gold flows freely. Other times they sulk and pits collapse. The listeners nod gravely. Whether or not they believe, they understand the power of stories to explain the unexplainable. You glance around and notice how each face glows orange in the firelight, softened by shadow. Even the most skeptical merchant listens as if his life depends on the outcome. You smile. In truth, maybe it does. A story, after all, is a kind of currency. It preserves lessons, commands respect, and grants belonging. In Mali, gold dust bought salt. But griots, they bought time itself. The night deepens. A final story winds down, ending not with a crash but with a sigh, like a candle being blown out. The griots close their eyes briefly, hands resting on their knees, and the audience exhales together. A goat bleats somewhere in the dark, ruining the solemnity, and a ripple of laughter spreads. You chuckle too, because no matter how grand the legend, reality always sneaks in with hooves. As the fire dwindles to embers, you rise slowly, feeling the weight of the stories settle inside you. They are as golden as the dust in the markets, as enduring as the mosque's clay walls. You walk away with their echoes in your ears, the griots' voices following you into the night like a lullaby. The stories still hum in your ears as you wake to the sound of weaving looms. The marketplace is quieter this morning, but here in the corner where textiles dominate, you feel another kind of wealth take shape. Long wooden frames creak under the hands of patient weavers, threads stretched taut, shuttles darting back and forth with a rhythm that feels almost like breathing. You settle onto a bench, watching cloth grow line by line like a painting unfurling in real time. At first glance it seems simple. Stripes of cotton in earth tones, soft and durable, practical for desert life. But then your eyes catch the glint. Woven among the fibers are threads that shine faintly. Some imported silks, others dyed so richly they glow like embers. Occasionally, in finer pieces, gold threads sneak through, catching the sun in quick flashes. Not heavy armor, not ostentatious robes, just subtle sparks enough to whisper rather than shout. A woman sits before you, her hands steady, her face calm. She pulls the shuttle across, taps it down, pulls again. The sound becomes a lullaby, thunk, swish, tap. She pauses to examine her work, smoothing her palm across the cloth, then continues. It's hypnotic, and you feel yourself slipping into her rhythm, as though each line she weaves tightens your eyelids a little more. Cloth was more than fashion here. It was status, currency, identity. Indigo-dyed robes marked wealth and taste. Shimmering fabrics hinted at connections to far-off traders, and certain patterns spoke louder than words. Historians still argue whether specific designs carried secret meanings, messages of clan belief or resistance. You smile at the thought of robes acting like medieval text messages. Don't talk to me. I'm from that family, or I'm rich enough to afford extra indigo. Nearby, merchants unroll bolts of imported silk, their smooth shimmer dazzling against the rougher cotton. Buyers stroke the fabric, close their eyes and sigh. It's not just touch, it's theater. To drape silk across your shoulders here is to drape stories from faraway China, India, and Persia. Every fold whispers of caravan routes, of oceans, of worlds beyond the desert. A fringe tale catches your ear. Someone murmurs of a robe woven entirely with threads soaked in gold dust, so heavy it could only be worn for ceremonies, and only for a few minutes at a time. True or not, you imagine the wearer shuffling forward awkwardly, sweating under the weight, smiling through clenched teeth while everyone applauds politely. You chuckle at the thought, grateful for your modern cotton t-shirt. Children scamper between stalls, laughing, tugging at scraps of fabric. One wraps himself in a discarded strip, declaring himself a king, while another pretends her piece is a cloak of invisibility. You grin, remembering that fabric has always been more than utility. It is imagination stitched into thread. The smells here differ from the salt and gold stalls. You catch whiffs of dye vats, earthy, sharp, sometimes almost sweet. Indigo stains cling to fingers and robes, marking the workers like tattoos of trade. You imagine these stains never quite wash away, that even in old age their hands will carry the quiet proof of years spent coaxing color from plants and minerals. And then the bargaining begins. Cloth is unfurled, inspected, folded again. Pouches of dust are exchanged, blocks of salt weighed. Fingers stroke seams, voices rise and fall. Laughter punctuates arguments. The hum of trade here is softer than in the gold market, but no less vital. You feel it seep into you. Wealth here is not just glittering, it is wearable, huggable, stitched into the skin of the city itself. You lean back and close your eyes, the rhythm of looms pulsing in your ears. Thunk, swish, tap, thunk, swish, tap. It is the sound of patience, of generations weaving identity. And in those quiet beats you realize, gold may sparkle in markets, but here in Mali, wealth also walked down the street, flowing like cloth against the wind. The loom's rhythm fades as you drift toward another corner of the city, where words, not cloth, are traded. You hear the scrape of quills, but this time the voices aren't Malian. They carry the lilt of Arabic, sharper consonants, syllables that seem to curl like smoke. You round the corner and find a cluster of men seated beneath a canopy, parchment spread before them, scribbling furiously. Their robes are lighter, their beards neatly trimmed, their eyes darting to every detail of the bustling city. You've stumbled upon the visitors, the Arab travelers whose notes will one day carry tales of Mali across continents. Among them, Ibn Battuta. You watch him pause, gaze narrowing on a merchant pouring gold dust into a scale, and then bend over his page, scratching down his astonishment. His brow furrows, his lips twitch, as though he can't decide if this is a marketplace or a dream. A companion beside him, Al-Umari, perhaps mutters observations, pointing at the indigo-dyed robes, the salt slabs stacked like fortresses, the mud mosques rising like earthen castles. His hand moves constantly, jotting, correcting, rephrasing. You imagine their manuscripts traveling far north, their words shaping how strangers envision a land they may never see. Historians still argue whether these accounts were embellished, trimmed or exaggerated for dramatic effect. After all, what earns more attention back home? The city was moderately prosperous, or the king has so much gold he tosses it out like breadcrumbs. You chuckle quietly, suspecting medieval audiences weren't so different from today's click-hungry readers. Nearby, a group of children gathers, whispering, giggling at the sight of these foreign men. One dares to tug Ibn Battuta's robe before darting away, leaving the scholar scowling as the crowd laughs softly. Even in solemn observation, reality has a way of poking fun. You lean closer to glimpse a page. The script flows like waves, each letter curling, rising, dipping. You catch phrases, abundance of gold, justice of the king, hospitality unmatched. You smile. These notes will become legend, polished by time until Mali gleams brighter than perhaps even reality intended. But not all is flattery. One of the scholars records that some women go about unveiled, to his great dismay. He shakes his head, muttering about propriety, while the locals nearby laugh at his discomfort. For them, his judgment is irrelevant. Their customs hold their own weight. This clash of perspective adds spice to the otherwise reverent descriptions, reminding you that travelers always filter what they see through their own eyes. A fringe tale whispers through the crowd that Ibn Battuta himself was so overwhelmed by the generosity of a Malian host that he tried to downplay it in his writings, lest readers accuse him of exaggeration. Whether true or not, you picture him chewing nervously on his quill, wondering if anyone would believe the sheer scale of wealth here. The scribes pause to sip water, their eyes darting constantly, hungry for details. One sketches a rough outline of a mosque, another traces the curve of a camel's hump. They argue softly about terminology, bickering like siblings over the right phrasing. You realize that history isn't just written, it's debated, drafted, and occasionally misremembered over warm water and dusty parchments. As the sun lowers, they pack their notes carefully, wrapping them in cloth, tucking them away as though carrying treasure. And in truth they are. Their words will weigh more than gold, shaping how future empires dream of Mali. You picture kings in Europe or scholars in Cairo poring over these accounts, eyes wide, whispering, "Is such a place truly possible?" You stretch, yawn, and glance once more at Ibn Battuta, who scribbles until the last moment, his ink-stained fingers smudging the page. He doesn't notice the dust settling on his work, the faint shimmer of gold particles drifting down like blessings. Perhaps centuries later, those particles will still cling faintly to his manuscript, a physical proof that the land of gold left its mark not only in memory, but in matter itself. The traveler's words still echo in your head as you leave their canopy behind. You wander back toward the edges of the market, where guards linger more heavily. Their spears gleam faintly in the evening light, their turbans wrapped tightly, their eyes sharp. You sense a shift in atmosphere. This isn't the easy bustle of scales tipping or cloth fluttering. This is about secrecy, control, the invisible line between what the world may see and what it may never touch. The secret lies in the gold nuggets. Not dust, not glittering grains passed through scales, but the solid lumps pulled directly from Bambuk and Boer. Heavy, raw, dazzling. And yet by imperial decree they never leave the land. All trade is in dust. All stories told abroad speak only of shimmering specks, never of the great golden hearts buried in Mali's earth. You watch as a miner approaches with a guard. He carries a pouch smaller than a fist, and when he opens it discreetly, you glimpse not dust but a nugget. The sight is startling. It catches the sun in a way that makes dust look like ash in comparison. The guard's gaze sweeps the crowd sharp and suspicious before they vanish into a shaded doorway. A transaction of tribute, not trade. You realize quickly, this gold isn't for markets. It is for kings. Historians still argue whether this strict control was genius economic policy or simple paranoia. Did it keep Mali's wealth stable, or did it limit the empire's influence abroad? You can almost hear two medieval scholars debating over bowls of porridge, one insisting the secrecy preserved power, the other sighing, yes. But imagine the jewelry we could have imported. Fringed tales bloom in whispers. One insists a foreign merchant once tried to smuggle a nugget out by swallowing it. According to the story, the poor man was caught. And let's just say the retrieval method was both thorough and humiliating. Whether truth or warning tale, you decide never to test your own digestive abilities with bullion. The secrecy has another side effect. It fuels rumor. Beyond Mali, kings and merchants dream of nuggets the size of fists, even heads, hidden deep in forests no outsider may enter. Maps begin to sprout legends, filling blank spaces with golden empires, fountains of treasure, rivers paved with glitter, all of it fed by the absence of proof. You chuckle at the thought. Sometimes mystery is the best marketing. Meanwhile, life in the market continues, but you notice how even merchants who deal openly with dust avoid speaking of nuggets. They shift the conversation quickly, glance at guards and lower their voices. It is taboo, a subject cloaked in silence. Gold dust is the face for the world. Nuggets are the bones of the empire, never shown. You pause by a storyteller's circle where someone murmurs about the king's treasury, guarded day and night, where nuggets lie in great baskets, gleaming so brightly that anyone who looks too long goes blind. Is it fact? Is it metaphor? No one seems to care. The mystery itself is the treasure. As the sun sinks, shadows stretch long across the stalls. You feel the weight of what isn't seen, heavier than all the dust glittering openly. Mali's wealth wasn't just what it displayed. It was what it concealed. And in that silence, in that refusal to let the nuggets roam, lies the real lesson. Sometimes, the power of gold comes not from showing it, but from keeping it hidden, an untouchable promise buried deep in the earth. The hush of secrecy around the nuggets lingers in your mind as you follow the sound of drums deeper into the city. The beat is steady, deliberate, like a heart magnified through skin and wood. You step into an open courtyard where people gather in vibrant circles. Today you've stumbled into a ceremony, royal ritual and soaked in symbolism. At the center, a stool carved from dark wood waits beneath a canopy. It's no ordinary chair. It's a throne, the vessel of power itself. Around it, attendants prepare offerings, gourds filled with milk, bowls of cola nuts, and, most striking, calabashes dusted with gold. Not coins, not bars, but shimmering powder sprinkled like sacred spice. You lean closer. catching the way it clings to the air, drifting like pollen in sunlight. The king arrives, robed in indigo so deep it swallows light, trimmed with faint golden threads that glimmer when he moves. The drums shift into a sharper rhythm as he steps forward, barefoot, deliberate. The crowd lowers itself, murmuring blessings. He sits on the stool, and attendants immediately scatter dust across his shoulders, chest, and brow. It clings to his skin, and for a moment he looks less like a man and more like a figure carved of light. Gold here is more than wealth. Its legitimacy, sanctity, a seal stamped not in wax but in shimmer. When the griots chant his lineage, their words seem to weigh heavier under the glitter. They remind everyone, this man is more than flesh. He is history embodied, and gold is the proof. Historians still argue whether every coronation truly included gold dust, or whether foreign accounts embellished it for drama. You smile at the thought of a medieval scribe adding, "And then he poured glitter everywhere," because it sounded more impressive than they just clapped politely. But standing here watching the dust float like halos in the air, you believe the tales. Gifts follow the ritual. Courtiers approach one by one, offering bracelets, carved ivory, bolts of cloth, and always gold. Some sprinkle dust into the king's open palm. Others present small nuggets carefully wrapped that vanish quickly into guarded chests. Each gift is both tribute and performance. To give is to acknowledge his authority. To receive is to bind loyalty. A fringe tale murmured among the crowd catches your ear, that once a rival chief arrived at a coronation with no gift, only empty hands. To cover his shame, he sprinkled sand instead of gold. The king noticed but accepted silently, and within months the chief's fortunes collapsed, his village swallowed by famine. Coincidence? Maybe. Warning story? Almost certainly. You grin. It's the kind of parable griots love to tuck into ceremonies as cautionary background noise. The drums swell again, and dancers leap forward, their bodies shimmering with golden powder rubbed into their skin. Each step kicks up tiny clouds that hang in the torchlight. Children clap, women ululate, and the rhythm builds until even your heartbeat feels tethered to the drum's pulse. And then, silence. The king raises his staff, gold-tipped, of course, and the crowd bows once more. The ritual has done its work. Power has been displayed, dust has sealed it, and alliances are as solid as the salt blocks stacked in the market. As you drift back into the shadows, you realize you've seen more than a coronation. You've seen how gold becomes glue, binding people together not by force but by shimmer, ritual, and the weight of tradition. Dust, after all, may blow away in a breath, but here in Mali it could hold entire kingdoms steady. The echo of drums fades as you wander toward the riverfront. Evening prayers begin to rise, drifting across the city in overlapping waves. You follow the sound into the courtyard of a mosque, its mud brick walls glowing orange in the sinking sun. Here the air is different, cooler, quieter, reverent. And yet, as always in Mali, the shimmer of gold lingers, tucked into corners of faith. Inside, the lamps burn low. Worshippers kneel on mats woven from reeds, their robes brushing against the earth. The imam's voice carries steady and calm, guiding the prayer like a boat across still water. You sink down among them, listening not with ears alone but with your whole chest, feeling the cadence ripple through you. When prayers end, you notice something subtle. Small bowls placed at the edges of the room, glinting faintly in the light. Donations. Pouches of dust spill into them, pinches dropped with reverent fingers. Wealth here doesn't boast, it hums. Patrons give not to flaunt, but to sustain the community. To keep lamps burning, to support scholars, to send caravans carrying books as well as salt. You imagine the gold dust rising like incense, an offering that feeds both the soul and the stomach. Historians still argue whether mosques in Mali truly gleamed with gold or whether foreign writers exaggerated. Did patrons plaster nuggets into walls or simply fund manuscripts and lamps? The truth may be in between. You picture an Arab traveler stepping inside, eyes widening at the faint glint of a gilded lamp, then rushing home to declare, "The whole place shines like the sun." You chuckle softly. Exaggeration, after all, is an old traveler's trick. Still, gold and faith intertwine in ways you can't ignore. You watch a young boy carry a lamp forward, its rim dusted faintly. He places it near the imam, who nods. The glow brightens the space, not dazzling but warm like a hearth. In that moment, you realize the dust is less about display than devotion. Light itself becomes gilded prayer. A fringe tale slips into memory. One story claims that during a famine, a wealthy merchant donated so much gold to a mosque that the floor was sprinkled with it. Worshippers supposedly knelt directly on the dust, rising with glitter stuck to their foreheads. Whether true or not, the image lingers, both comical and sacred. A congregation shimmering like stars after prayer. The mosque itself hums with daily life. Children recite verses in sing-song voices, some stumbling, some proud. Scholars sit in corners debating astronomy, law, and poetry in the same breath. Their hands rest on manuscripts bound in leather, edges glowing faintly with gilded decoration. Gold here doesn't shout. It frames knowledge, reminding everyone that wisdom too is treasure. As dusk deepens, the courtyard fills with chatter. Women distribute bowls of food, simple millet porridge flavored with spice, purchased with donations gathered in dust. You watch men and women share from the same pot, laughter weaving between them like a second prayer. Gold may fund the meal, but the taste of cumin and warmth of company are the real feast. You tilt your head back. The first stars prick the sky, silver against indigo. And here beneath them, gold continues to glimmer softly. On lamps, in manuscripts, in bowls of offering, it is no longer just currency or spectacle. It is faith folded into daily life, light braided into prayer, dust that becomes devotion. You rise from the mosque's courtyard and wander toward the river, drawn by the hush of water against earth. The Niger spreads wide before you, its surface catching the last glow of dusk. The air is cooler here, carrying the scent of reeds, fish, and damp clay. You pause on the bank, watching barges slide silently along the current, their hulls loaded with the treasures of Mali's heart. The boats are long, narrow, carved from single tree trunks. Men stand barefoot, poles in hand, guiding the barges with slow, deliberate pushes. Their robes billow in the breeze, catching stray flecks of gold dust that shimmer briefly before vanishing into the air. You realize these riverboats are the invisible arteries of the empire, moving salt, grain, cloth, manuscripts, and yes, gleaming pouches of dust, without which trade would wither like a vine in drought. One boat draws close, and you see baskets piled high with cola nuts, their red skins shining like embers. A merchant leans over, sprinkling a pinch of dust into a pouch offered from the shore. The exchange is quick, wordless, efficient. The dust glitters, the boat moves on, and the river swallows the secret transaction with its endless murmur. Historians still argue whether river trade outweighed camel caravans in importance, or if the two existed in delicate balance. Was the Niger the empire's lifeline or just its quieter partner? You imagine scholars debating with diagrams and maps, while the river itself chuckles softly. I carried it all. Whether you noticed or not, a fringe tale surfaces in your thoughts. Fishermen whisper of giant catfish with bellies full of gold, swallowing careless pouches dropped from boats. Supposedly, one such fish grew so fat it blocked a tributary until villagers caught it, splitting it open to reveal a fortune. True or not, You grin at the thought of Mali's wealth swimming lazily beneath the reeds, scales shimmering like coins. As night deepens, lanterns flicker aboard the boats. The glow spreads across the river, each light rippling like a golden coin tossed into water. The silence is profound, broken only by the soft slap of poles against the current, the occasional splash of a fish, the distant cry of a heron. Children gather on the shore, waving to passing boats. Some toss stones into the water, aiming to startle the traders. Others simply sit, eyes dreamy, imagining adventures beyond the bend. The river is not just commerce, it is story, escape, possibility. You feel its pull yourself, as though if you stepped onto a barge you might drift forever, carried through deserts, forests, and oceans, until you vanished into myth. The boats continue into the dark, their lanterns shrinking to pinpricks, then disappearing entirely. The river returns to quiet, carrying secrets too heavy for words. You lie back on the bank, grass tickling your skin, and let the lull of water fold over you. Gold in the markets dazzles, in the mosques it sanctifies, but here on the Niger, it becomes fluid. It moves with the current, invisible yet constant, binding Mali not with shine but with flow. The empire breathes with this river, and as you drift into drowsiness, you feel yourself breathing with it too. Section 15, you wake to the sound of murmuring voices, low and deliberate, like waves lapping against the riverbank. Following the sound, you slip into a shaded courtyard where scribes hunch over tablets and parchment. The air smells of ink and dust, with the faint tang of dried millet wafting in from a nearby kitchen. Here, wealth is not piled in baskets or stacked in salt slabs. It is tallied, recorded, measured in words that carry as much weight as gold. A man with a thin beard and weary eyes dips his reed pen, pauses, and writes a number. The others nod, one tapping his finger against a line of script. They are calculating tribute, taxes in gold dust, salt, grain, and cloth. Each figure is muttered aloud, then inscribed, as though speaking it seals it. The sound is strangely hypnotic, a chorus of numbers, words, and sighs. You lean closer and see scales beside them, their brass bowls still shimmering faintly. Pouches of dust lie open, measured, recorded, sealed again. Yet what strikes you most is not the glitter of gold, but the seriousness of the scribes. Their eyes do not wander, their fingers move with reverence. To them, a word on parchment weighs more than the dust it represents. Historians still argue whether Mali's bureaucracy was fully centralized or largely local, handled by trusted scribes in each city. Some claim records stretched across the empire, binding villages to the capital. Others believe much was oral, preserved by griots rather than ink. You smile at the thought, a medieval debate between team paperwork and team storytelling. Both, you suspect, were right. One fringe tale bubbles up, about a scribe so precise he supposedly weighed each grain of dust individually, refusing to sleep until every speck was noted. People joked that he aged twice as fast, counting himself into wrinkles. Whether true or exaggerated, you glance at the man before you, his hair already streaked with gray, and wonder how close the tale lies to fact. A boy rushes in, clutching a pouch. He spills it open, and dust scatters across the mat like stars across a night sky. The scribes groan in unison, shooing him back. Carefully they gather the grains, muttering numbers under their breath as if each grain is a syllable in a long poem. You suppress a laugh. Imagine accountants today bent double, sweeping glitter with goose-feather brooms, sighing dramatically at every sparkle. Yet beneath the humor, you sense the gravity. These records matter. They define alliances, debts, gifts, and obligations. A single miscount might anger a noble, strain a village, or shift the balance of trade. The ink carries more danger than the dust, for dust can vanish in a sneeze, but words endure. As you watch the scribes pause, one scratches his chin, debating with another about whether to round a figure. They argue softly, voices rising just enough to make the others grin. For all their seriousness, they are still human, worn, tired, sometimes petty. You find it oddly comforting. The courtyard quiets again. The scratching of pens resumes, steady as rainfall. A chicken clucks nearby, pecking at the dust on the ground. You chuckle. No empire, however golden, can keep chickens out of its ledgers. You lean back, eyes heavy, listening to the rhythm of words and numbers. In this world, wealth does not clink or shimmer. It whispers, scratches, and sighs. And somehow those whispers weigh heavier than the dust itself. The courtyard of scribes fades behind you, and the murmur of numbers gives way to a quieter hum, the kind of hush that suggests people are listening for something far away. You follow it to a gathering of merchants beneath a wooden awning. They lean in close, voices dropping low as if their words might sprout wings and escape into the night. What you hear is not about today's market or tomorrow's tax. It is about whispers carried across seas. Europe distant, curious, and frankly a little envious. You picture pale-faced kings sitting in stone castles, poring over tales of Mali with hungry eyes. They trace their fingers over maps where deserts are marked with golden suns, imagining caravans brimming with treasure. The merchants chuckle. They know their empire has become rumor itself. One man mimics a European, widening his eyes and croaking, "They say the roofs are made of gold." The group bursts into laughter, slapping their thighs, amused at how exaggeration travels faster than camels. Yet beneath the humor lies truth. Mali's wealth has echoed far beyond its borders, inspiring both awe and jealousy. Historians still argue whether medieval Europe truly grasped the scale of Mali's riches or merely dreamed in excess. Was it Musa's pilgrimage to Cairo that sparked their frenzy? Or did Arab accounts exaggerate until gold seemed to fall like rain in the Sahel? You smirk, imagining medieval dinner parties where nobles whispered, "Have you heard of this Mansa Musa? He's so rich he ruined an economy just by showing up." A fringe tale reaches your ears, one claiming that European sailors once chased mirages across the Atlantic, convinced they would stumble upon golden cities built by Mali's kin. Instead, they found endless waves and hungry gulls. True or not, you grin at the thought of exasperated sailors grumbling, "We came for gold and got seasickness." Nearby, a griot begins to sing softly, weaving rumor into melody. His voice is low, playful, carrying lines like, "The world dreams of our dust, yet they do not taste our salt." Children gather, giggling at his rhymes, while elders nod knowingly. The performance is half satire, half warning. Envy, like dust, drifts everywhere. And not all of it brings warmth. You glance at a trader's ledger and see notes scribbled about routes north, goods promised, names of partners in faraway lands. Beside some entries, tiny sketches of coins appear, as though he is already converting dust into the language of foreigners. He catches you staring, winks, and tucks the ledger away. Secrets are worth more when hidden. The night air grows cooler and a breeze carries sand across the square. The merchants wrap their cloaks tighter, their conversation turning to practical worries. Bandits on the roads, taxes owed, the challenge of storing salt during the rains. Yet beneath all of it, the envy of outsiders lingers like an invisible guest at their table. You realize then, Mali's gold did not just enrich the empire, it reshaped imaginations thousands of miles away. It tilted compasses, fueled quests, and painted maps with longing. And here you are, leaning back in the shadows, listening to men laugh at the world's fantasies, while knowing that envy itself is sometimes more dangerous than swords. The laughter of merchants fades, replaced by the creak of wagons and the low murmur of worried voices. You wander toward the outskirts of the city where granaries loom, mud brick towers swollen with grain, their surfaces patched with clay like healing skin. Yet the mood here is not abundance. It is tension. Women shuffle past with empty baskets, men argue in hushed tones, and children sit quietly, chewing on thin pieces of bread that crumble too quickly. A famine has come. Not a dramatic one-day disaster, but the slow tightening of hunger, like a belt cinched notch by notch. The harvests faltered, the rains misbehaved, and the empire's stomach growls in unison. You feel it in the air, the dryness of throats, the anxious shuffle of feet, the weight of hunger pressing against ribs, and yet behind guarded doors, gold still glitters. The treasury is full, baskets of dust and nuggets resting quietly, untouched by the hunger outside. You watch as a nobleman debates with advisors. His voice is firm. We have reserves. His hand rests on a pouch that could buy a mountain of salt, but only if caravans arrive in time. Salt can preserve grain. Gold can purchase food, but neither can summon rain. Historians still argue whether Mali's rulers managed famine well or poorly. Did they release reserves generously, or hoard them for loyalty alone? Records suggest both. Sometimes kindness, sometimes calculation. You sigh inwardly, realizing that history, like hunger, never offers neat answers. A fringe tale surfaces from the crowd. It claims that during one famine, a ruler tried to mix ground gold into porridge, convinced it would strengthen the body like sunlight itself. The people ate, their tongues glittering, but their bellies still empty. True or not, you picture glitter-covered lips and tired sighs, and you almost laugh. Dark humor, yes, but humor all the same. Nearby, you see smaller acts of quiet generosity. A merchant shares a handful of millet with neighbors, shrugging off the loss. A woman breaks her bread in half, pressing the larger piece into a child's hand. Even in hunger, community breathes, stubborn and resilient. You pause by the river where boats arrive with sacks of grain from distant lands. Men unload them quickly, their voices urgent, their movements brisk. Pouches of dust pass from hand to hand, gold exchanged for food as though the empire itself were bartering with fate. For a moment, the balance holds. The river carrying not just trade, but relief. As evening falls, the granaries echo with the sound of grain being poured, a soft rushing noise like rain finally arriving. People gather, bowls in hand, waiting. The first servings are small, but enough to soothe. A child licks the rim of his bowl clean, smiling through the thinness of his face. You realize as you watch that Mali's true wealth was not in glittering dust or blocks of salt, but in the fragile balance between plenty and hunger. Gold could buy food, yes, but food could never be replaced by gold. The empire knew this, even if sometimes too late. The stars rise overhead, cold and distant. You lean back, listening to the murmur of people sharing bowls, the clink of spoons, the sigh of relief carried into the night. Hunger is not gone, but for now it has loosened its grip. And somewhere in the treasury, the dust continues to wait, silent, gleaming, heavy as always. The granaries fade into the night, and you follow the faint glow of lanterns into the desert beyond the city. A small camp has gathered, scholars, traders, and curious minds seated in a circle, their shadows long against the dunes. The air is cool, the stars sharp and endless above. Here debate begins, carried not on parchment, but on voices weaving through the dark. One scholar clears his throat and poses the question, did Mali's gold change the world beyond its borders? The others lean in, A trader insists, yes, pointing toward Cairo, where Mansa Musa's pilgrimage supposedly showered so much gold that prices collapsed for years. Another scholar shakes his head, arguing that inflation is too complex to blame on one emperor's generosity. Historians still argue whether Musa broke Egypt's economy, he mutters, or whether Cairo was already wobbling under its own weight. The circle chuckles softly. You imagine medieval economists with furrowed brows, scratching quills and muttering equations, while Musa sits somewhere in paradise shrugging, "I just wanted to tip big." A fringed tale bubbles up, shared with a mischievous grin. It claims that European merchants began hoarding Malian dust secretly, convinced that owning even a pinch would attract more gold like magnets, attract iron. Some apparently slept with pouches under their pillows, waiting to wake up rich. Whether truth or bedtime superstition, the image makes you grin. Grown men treating gold like a magical teddy bear. The debate continues, weaving through the firelight. Someone argues that Mali's gold fueled Europe's hunger for exploration, whispering promises of golden empires across seas. Another insists it was merely a footnote, dwarfed by other forces. Voices rise, fall, overlap. The desert absorbs it all, patient, eternal. The air smells faintly of smoke and cumin from a cooking pot bubbling nearby. A boy stirs it absently, half listening, half dozing. The smell blends with the crackle of fire, making the whole debate feel less like an academic duel and more like a bedtime story told to the stars. You close your eyes for a moment, letting the voices swirl. Each opinion feels like a grain of dust, small alone, heavy together. The truth is slippery, shimmering, impossible to pin down, but maybe that's the point. Gold, after all, was never just metal here. It was myth, rumor, debate, and dream. The circle quiets as the fire dwindles. Someone laughs softly, someone sighs. The stars remain vast and indifferent. You realize you've witnessed something rare. Not just history being lived, but history being argued, shaped, polished like a nugget rolled endlessly between fingers. You lie back on the cool sand, listening as the last scholar murmurs, "Gold weighs more than words, but words last longer than gold." The circle nods. The fire dies and silence folds around you like a cloak. Morning creeps over the stalls like a yawn, and you feel the city stretch beneath your feet. The marketplace you first wandered, bright with scales and jokes and the soft glitter of dust, looks quieter now. Not empty, just thinner. Piles are smaller. Voices are softer. The wind seems louder, filling gaps where bargaining once lived. You pass a stall whose cloth banners hang tired, their indigo faded to the color of worn seas. A cat naps on a folded mat, as if guarding the day's entire inventory with a single whisker. You are walking the long exhale of an empire. Trade routes have shifted, and the ripple touches everything. Where caravans once arrived like processions of stars, now they come in trickles, still miraculous but less certain. The reasons stack like the old salt blocks. The rise of new ports far to the west, rival routes tugging merchants toward different horizons, political prickle along distant paths, kingdoms upstream and downstream testing their weight. You can sense it in the way merchants talk, eyes flicking to the road, as if expecting a caravan that should have arrived yesterday, last week, last season. A mainstream truth steadies itself in your mind. Atlantic trade is awakening along distant coasts, and over time it will bend traffic and attention away from these inland arteries. The Niger still murmurs yes, but there are fresh currents elsewhere, tugging ships with bellies wider than any camel train. You picture sailors squinting at warped maps, arguing over winds while a bored camel mutters, "Good luck finding water out there." You pause at a jeweler's stall. Once this table would have shone with playful excess, bracelets stacked like coiled suns, rings scattered like seeds. Now the wares are modest, a few delicate loops, a chain with a humble charm. The jeweler shrugs when you ask gently with your eyes. People buy grain, he says, or book copies, or boat repairs. He smiles without bitterness. Gold waits. There's wisdom in that, and perhaps a touch of sleepiness. You take it like a cup of warm tea for your thoughts. Across the aisle, the salt towers look shorter. You remember when they rang like porcelain, fortress tall in their chalk-white pride. Today a boy chips at a block with a small iron tool, and the sound is quieter, as if the salt itself is whispering. He licks the dust from his finger, grins, and keeps chipping because life, no matter the era, knows how to continue. The griots are still here, their voices steady, but even their songs tilt toward the past more often than the present. You sit near them a moment and hear a familiar cadence. The lineage of kings, the glitter of pilgrimages, the timbre of drums beneath mud brick vaults. The stories don't dim, they deepen. The fire in their words is slower, like coals you can warm your hands over all night. They add a new refrain. Remember when the caravans sounded like rain? The crowd nods, smiling soft grins that carry both pride and ache. A quirky rumor drifts in like a sparrow and perches on your shoulder. Someone swears there's a market far north where a single stall never changes. Same seller, same scales, same pinch of dust, because the merchant refuses to admit time is moving. He supposedly paints fresh cracks onto his stall each morning, so it will look old but not older. Is it true? Who knows? You picture him tidying fake cobwebs onto a perfectly good beam and you chuckle. Denial, it seems, can be artisanal. Not all change is loss. New goods slip into view. Metal tools with unfamiliar edges, beads of foreign glass, even a spice that tingles your tongue with a brightness you can't quite name. The city adjusts its posture, shifting weight from one foot to the other, finding balance again. You watch a woman barter a tiny pouch of dust for a small iron plowshare and realize that glitter still oils the hinges of daily life. It's just choosing different doors. Historians still argue whether the decline was a cliff or a gentle slope, whether the trade towns of the Niger dimmed quickly under outside pressure or quietly refocused their glow inward. You lay a palm on the sun-warmed wall and feel what the wall feels. Not collapse, but settling. Mud brick doesn't fall apart. It returns to earth at its own patient speed, unless hands keep remaking it, and hands still do. You saw them at Jenne, remember? Smearing fresh clay like frosting, turning maintenance into festival. Continuity is a craft here. You turn a corner and find the scribes' courtyard. The numbers sung there sound smaller today. Less tribute, fewer shipments. But the pens have not stopped. A young scribe practices the curve of a letter, as if it were a dance step, whispering the word it belongs to. He looks up shy, then returns to his page. Even when caravans thin, ink survives. Words stubborn as reeds on a riverbank bend and keep growing. Down by the water, you watch boats push off with a steady shove. Fewer lanterns wink along the current, yet each light seems brighter for the space around it. Oars nudge the river's skin, leaving V-shaped sighs that drift back to shore. A fisherman lifts his net and laughs at his catch. 2 fish and a shoe, someone's traveling companion lost to the current. He ties the shoe to a pole like a flag and declares himself ruler of the kingdom of left feet, which, judging by the cheers from the bank, is suddenly a respected power. Even in quieter seasons, humor refuses to go extinct. You pass the mud walls of a mosque and catch a shimmer in the plaster, faint, almost imagined, like a note you can't quite hear. Maybe some old donation left behind a ghost of gold, or maybe it's just sunlight arguing with dust motes. Either way, the glow is real enough in your chest. Faith hasn't vanished. It has learned to speak softly. Lamps still swing from beams. Bowls still wait for offerings. The call to prayer still steps across rooftops at the hour, light-footed and sure. A merchant waves you over to try a sweet made from millet and honey. You taste it and close your eyes. It's humble, but there's the sparkle of spice. No, not gold, just memory. He tells you business is slower. Then he taps his chest and says, "But the stories are fatter." You both laugh. He sells you another sweet for a promise that you'll return tomorrow, which you will. If only to let your tongue rest on that familiar comfort again. You think back to the miners beneath the forest canopy, to the drummed coronations, to the gold-limbed manuscripts that glowed like stars pressed flat. None of that is erased. It settles into layers like silt on the riverbed, like powder on a scribe's sleeve. The empire shifts. The people adjust. The dust remembers. A final breeze wanders through the market and lifts a swirl of sand and glitter. For an instant, the air is the same air as your first night here. Tiny suns spinning above a cloth mat, laughter at a sly bargain, the breath of a camel heavy with salt. Then the glitter falls, the moment passes, and the present returns with a small smile. You let it. You've learned that not every glow must be blinding to be true. As twilight leans in, the stores close with gentle thuds. Someone sings a working song that becomes a lullaby by the last verse. Somewhere a goat claims a dignified position on top of a crate, because goats have always understood the importance of height in politics. You grin, tuck that image beside the old joke about sticky-beard merchants and the noble kingdom of left feet, and feel the day fold itself neatly. The fading glow isn't failure. It's evening. It's the hour when markets whisper and lamps thrive. It's the time when history stops shouting and begins to hum. And as you breathe in the warm spiced air, salt clay, a memory of ink, you understand that in Mali, even a quieter day can weigh more than words.